Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, picture this. You're staring at a pile of kitchen scraps. You grab your phone and you search for the absolute best way to handle household waste. And if you've ever done that, you know exactly how fast things get completely overwhelming, right? The sheer volume of conflicting Google search results is honestly enough to make anyone just toss their banana peels in the regular trash and call it a day. But don't worry, because today we are going to clear all of that up for you. We're going to break down the actual science of decomposition and figure out how to build a custom biological system that genuinely makes sense for your space.
So let's start with the big question that you have probably been pondering. Which compost method actually works? Well, when you try to answer this, you invariably get 5 different answers from 5 different people. And you know what the most frustrating part is? All of them are a little bit right, and all of them are a little bit wrong for your highly specific situation. It is totally valid to feel confused right now, but that confusion actually comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of what composting really is at its core.
All right, let's dive right into this with a major paradigm shift. Composting is not just one single process. Actually, scratch that. It's not a rigid method that you just blindly pick off a list at all. Instead, composting is an entire category of distinct biological workforces. We're talking cold, hot, vermicomposting, bokashi, and trench. Now, they're all ultimately doing the exact same basic job, breaking organic matter down into something your soil can actually use. But they are using completely different biology to get there, operating at wildly different speeds, and bringing completely different trade-offs to the table. Section 1. The temperature extremes, cold versus hot piles. Let's look at the ambient, kind of a lazy energy of cold piles and contrast that directly against the fast-paced, aggressive nature of hot composting. Cold composting is what almost everybody is already doing, whether they realize it or not. It's that pile in the corner of your yard where you toss leaves and kitchen scraps and just let it sit. Biologically, this is driven by mesophilic bacteria and fungi, organisms that absolutely love hanging out in that ambient 50 to 100 degree Fahrenheit range. Because you aren't managing it, it is delightfully low labor. You don't need a thermometer, you don't need a schedule, just a lot of patience, because it's slow. We are talking 6 months to 2 years here. And crucially, because it is so chill, it never gets hot enough to kill weed seeds. So if you toss mature seed heads in there, you are for sure going to see them sprout in your garden next spring. Now, on the flip side, we have hot composting. This is literally the exact opposite philosophy. It's the same basic inputs, but managed aggressively for pure speed. It requires high physical labor to turn the pile by hand, but in exchange, thermophilic bacteria take over. They drive those temperatures way up, generating finished compost remarkably fast, and completely destroying those pesky weed seeds in the process.
Now, what is really interesting here is the incredibly strict set of workforce demands required to get that hot pile successfully cooking. You can't just throw things in a random heap. To invite those high-speed thermophilic bacteria to the party, you need a carbon-to-nitrogen ratio of around 25:1. That means carefully mixing your browns like dried leaves or wood chips with your greens like food scraps or fresh grass. You also need enough mass to physically hold the heat in, usually a minimum of 1 cubic yard. You need consistent moisture, which is perfectly described as feeling like a wrung-out sponge. And finally, you have to actively turn it to keep the oxygen flowing. Hit all those marks and the biology runs incredibly fast. And that brings us to absolutely crucial point, 131 degrees Fahrenheit. Why this number? Because when your meticulously managed hot pile climbs to at least 131 degrees, you cross a magic threshold. You are no longer just decomposing, you are officially pasteurizing the pile. Most pathogens and weed seeds absolutely cannot survive sustained heat in that zone. In fact, this pasteurization is so vital that if you buy compost from a commercial vendor, by law, it has to have gone through this exact thermophilic process. Section 2. Specialized workforces. Worms and fermentation. But hey, what if you don't have the space, or let's be honest, the back strength for a massive steaming hot pile? Well, let's transition into the quirkier methods in our biological toolkit that do not rely on standard bacterial heat to get the job done. First up in this specialized category is vermicomposting. This method completely swaps out those thermophilic bacteria for red wiggler earthworms, known scientifically as Icinia fetida. Here, the worms are actually eating your organic material, passing it through their gut via a highly unique combination of mechanical grinding and microbial digestion. But because worms are very particular and absolutely cannot handle high heat, you're making a deliberate trade. You're trading the high volume and high speed of a hot pile for a slow, steady worm's pace. But the reward? You get worm castings, a finished product that is structurally and biologically totally distinct from standard compost. And peer-reviewed science perfectly illustrates why making that trade-off is so worth it.
Back in the late 80s, Tamati and colleagues found that the plant growth responses you get from vermicompost go way beyond what you'd expect from just simple nutrients alone. Thanks to the intense microbial density and the humic substances generated right inside the worm's gut, there's an active biological signaling component happening. It's an incredible scientific advantage that turns your basic food scraps into a premium, highly concentrated garden product.
Okay, next up is the real odd one out on our list today, Bokashi. Bokashi is actually not composting at all. It's anaerobic fermentation. And this distinction fundamentally changes how you use it. Instead of oxygen-loving bacteria, this process relies on an inoculant, usually a bran or a carbon carrier that is heavily loaded with lactic acid bacteria, yeast, and phototrophic bacteria. You are essentially using these highly specialized microbes to pickle your waste in a totally oxygen-free environment. Let's walk through exactly how this works to clear up a really common misconception about Bokashi. Step 1 is layering your food scraps with that inoculant in a sealed, airtight container for about 3 weeks. Because it's an enclosed anaerobic system, this is the only home method that safely handles the really tough stuff. We're talking meat, dairy, cooked foods without attracting pests or creating some terrible odor. But here's the huge catch in step 2. What comes out of that bucket is acidic and pickled. It is not actually decomposed yet. Bokashi does not finish the job. It is strictly a pre-processing step. You have to hand off that pickled material by burying it in the soil for a few weeks, or by adding it to an aerobic, hot or cold pile so standard decomposition can finally take over and finish the whole shebang.
Section 3, Zero Infrastructure, the trench method. Now let's slow things down and look at the final tool in our kit, exploring absolute zero infrastructure. Trench composting strips away the bins, the turning, and the thermometers completely. You literally just dig a trench about 12 to 18 inches deep, drop your kitchen scraps directly in, and cover it right back up with soil. All the breakdown happens entirely in place, driven silently by native soil-dwelling organisms and wild earthworms. Because it's all buried deep underground, you get absolutely zero odor and zero pest pressure. However, you are heavily limited by your own willingness to go out and dig holes. Plus, because you have no control over temperature or moisture down there, the breakdown is just as slow and unpredictable as a cold pile. And most importantly, that patch of ground is out of production while the waste breaks down, meaning you need a rotation system where you plant your seeds exactly over the spot you dug the previous fall. Section 4. Building your perfect system. From competing methods to interlocking stages. Okay, here's the real secret. You don't actually have to pick just one winner from everything we just reviewed. These methods are not competitors fighting for supremacy in your backyard. They are, in fact, interlocking stages within a unified biological ecosystem. It's like a giant puzzle. Imagine this. You use Bokashi indoors to safely pre-ferment your difficult meat, dairy, and cooked scraps. You then hand that pickled waste off to your hot pile outside, which is eagerly taking in your bulk, yard waste, and weedy materials, quickly pasteurizing them and reducing their overall volume. Meanwhile, your vermicomposting worm bin is strictly fed your cleanest, most ideal food scraps, slowly churning out a highly concentrated, biologically active seed starter. Any overflow scraps you have? Well, those can go straight into the ground via trench composting, working the soil right in place. And lastly, cold composting is sitting there effortlessly catching whatever random yard waste is left over. You can even chain them together. A great trick is running a hot compost pile to break bulk material down, and once it fully cools off, you feed that material directly to your worms to generate premium castings. It's a beautifully interconnected web of efficiency. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final empowering question. Which combination fits your yard? Now that you truly understand the distinct biological workforces at your disposal, you don't have to just blindly pick a method off a list and hope for the best. You can look at how much space you have, how much time you're actually willing to spend, and exactly what kind of waste you generate. Evaluate your own needs and build a custom biological toolkit that works seamlessly for you. The science is entirely in your hands, so get out there and start building your perfect system today.